Welcome to Clean Air Action's podcast, Cleaning Up Dirty. We talk politics with non-toxic people. I'm Liz Green-Schultz. I run a political nonprofit called Clean Air Action.
And I'm Sean Hoffman, Legislative Director at Clean Air Action. Clean Air Action is the proud sister organization of the Clean Air Council, the oldest environmental and public health organization in Pennsylvania.
Together, we fight for your constitutional right to breathe healthy air. Over here at Clean Air Action, we fight dirty with clean. That applies to anyone who messes with our political and civil rights, including corporations and politicians.
Today we have with us PA Attorney General candidate Joe Kahn to talk about political corruption, division, and people power.
Joe, thank you so much for coming on our podcast.
Oh, thanks for coming here. This is great.
This is actually going to be our first episode of our new podcast because we hope it represents the dawning of a new time in politics of transparency and accountability. And just in case, since we're going to talk about some tough stuff, I brought some snacks. So if I need to, I can eat my feelings. Anyone, please feel free. I don't recommend the pickled jelly beans. I'll put that right out there.
It's an interesting mix of snacks here, folks.
We've got some Cheetos.
I see the Sour Patch Kid, so I got my eye on this.
Would you like a Sour Patch Kid?
When we get to the tough stuff.
Okay. Yeah. Sounds good. At Clean Air Action, we have a lot of conversations about corruption, which is why we asked you to come on our podcast, because you seem squeaky clean. I don't expect that one day we're going to read an indictment about you, and that's why it was so easy for us to endorse you.
So the obvious question, why'd you decide to run for AG?
First of all, thanks again for coming here. Huge thanks for the endorsement. I couldn't be more excited by that. And I'm running for Attorney General for the same reason I do pretty much everything for my kids. I want them and everyone else to have an Attorney General in Pennsylvania that's going to keep them safe from crime, from corruption, and attacks on our rights. And that especially includes their constitutional right to have a clean environment. And one of these days, they're going to ask me what I did to leave them with a better world, with a safe environment. And I know what I can do with this office. It's an amazing opportunity to do things that have never been done before. And so I'm thrilled to have this opportunity to do it. And I'm really excited to have your support.
Fantastic.
Thank you. Not if, but when you win the AG's office, the fact that we have an environmental constitutional right is pretty deep, right? That'll give you something to work with in that office.
I see Article 1, Section 27 as a superpower for an attorney general that has both the experience and the vision to enforce it. And, you know, I was the first county solicitor to do exactly that, to enforce our constitutional right to a clean environment, specifically our right to pure water. I did that when we went after polluters in Bucks County. And I did that when we stood in and protected the ban on fracking in this part of not just Pennsylvania, but the entire Delaware River Basin. And so this is the kind of power that no attorney general in America has, because we not only have this right for all Pennsylvanians, but everyone in government, from the governor down to a file clerk in Doylestown, has an obligation to protect that right and to make decisions in accordance with that right. I think it's incredible that we have an attorney general's office that now is going after environmental crimes. I think that great people like Steve Sinicero and Josh Shapiro really push that office in that direction. And I really want to take this office in the next direction, which is to really think about environmental justice, right? And to be going beyond cases where we criminally prosecute polluters and people who are doing, you know, things that violate criminal law, and think more broadly and making sure that we have an office that will go after government itself when local government, state government, or anyone that has the obligation to the people lets the people down. And there's no office like Attorney General where we can go to court and take action. So it's an exciting opportunity, and I'm thrilled to be in this position.
You read my mind, because my next question for you was, do you have a sense of how politicians or corporations become corrupt? Because I understand that is a really central part of the Attorney General's office, particularly in Pennsylvania. Do you think it's from a lack of accountability? Do people slide into corruption by accident?
Yeah, I think it's all of the above. I've seen this, you know, from a number of different vantage points. It includes serving for 10 years in the U.S. Attorney's Office here in the Eastern District of Pennsylvania, where unfortunately we encountered a lot of corruption, and I prosecuted quite a bit of it. A lot of times what we found were people who went into politics, went into government with the best of intentions and kind of broke bad, right? They made decisions that became more about their own self-interest and less about the interest of the people. And I saw this time and time again. We held the mayors of Allentown and Reading accountable for their illegal activity. And these are both people who had done a lot of good work in their communities. But when you're in public service, this is about what you're doing for the people. And so one of the things that I saw as a common thread, both in my professional work and in my community, were people in these positions surrounding themselves with those who didn't have their best interests at heart. And a lot of times the story of corrupt politicians is a story of their inner circles, of not surrounding themselves with people who are going to tell them no, to hold them accountable. And to your point, it's sometimes the lack of accountability or a culture that you can kind of get away with whatever you want. Part of the reason why we were able to get hours and hours of recordings of these dirty politicians talking about these illegal things that they were getting away with is because they didn't think anyone was listening. And, it's a credit to the FBI agents up in Allentown who understood that there was an opportunity to use the power of the U.S. Attorney's Office to take action and to give the people in those communities a chance to have clean government. And so I think we need to do all the above. And, whether it's a lack of accountability from government agents or it's a lack of accountability from the people. I quit my job as a federal prosecutor because I was really unhappy that the DA in Philadelphia was corrupt and was likely to get reelected. And, we can sometimes be successful with federal prosecutions and arrests and things of that nature, but ultimately it's the power of the people to vote out these politicians that is the most powerful and effective thing. And I think we're looking at Donald Trump, facing 4 indictments and seeing a possible election as a way to get around it, and I think that it just highlights the need for all of us to make sure that we show up and vote. And those of us who have the opportunity in government to hold bad actors accountable to do our part too.
A phrase we use a lot in my job is absolute power corrupts absolutely. So I love what you said about surrounding yourself with people who will say no to you. Have you seen shifts in politics in the last 5 to 10 years? Does corruption feel like a new thing? Is it a tale as old as time?
Yeah, I think corruption's been around for a while. What I'd say, and obviously the big change in the last 5 to 10 years has been Donald Trump, right? I mean, I think in the words of Marjorie Taylor Greene, MAGA has now fully taken over the Republican Party if it hadn't before. And aside from that, I think more broadly, one shift I've seen is there are a lot of folks involved in politics, regardless of their party, that are doing more talking than listening. And I think that's also a recipe for trouble. One of the dangers that I have seen with politicians that become corrupt is their ego getting too big. And that's part of why you need people around you to kind of keep you in check. And so I think that corruption has been around for a long time. I think one of the other dynamics that's happened in the last 5 to 10 years is that the laws that we have for addressing corruption have only become weaker. And so that's made it even harder to hold some of these bad actors accountable. And it gets back to the need to make sure we get people out to vote. I'm really thrilled you're visiting us here in Doylestown at this amazing law firm that I'm thrilled to be part of, Curtin & Hefner. We're in Central Bucks County, where my fellow parents and I and fellow neighbors, we kicked the Moms for Liberty out of our school board, right? They'd taken over. Yeah, let's hear it. And they'd taken over my kids' schools.
That's worth a Cheeto, a celebratory Cheeto.
Let's do it. And our firm was also part of the effort to deal with the gerrymandering that had happened here, right? We had to go to the courts. We had to go to the ballot box. But there was rampant corruption in this school district, right? And yes, you can have an attorney general that's investigating that and prosecuting that. But at the end of the day, making sure that we actually elect the right people is more powerful than anything else that we can do.
Well, given that not only is it a tale as old as time, but there's a lot of young people these days who are really cynical about the state of politics. Do you have any advice for the cynical millennial out there who thinks the system is irreparably broken?
Well, look, I think, first of all, there's a lot of reason for that cynicism and for that anger, right? I mean, you're coming out of college and you have these debts that are out of control. There's no way to buy a house, right? The wages that you should expect for an honest day's work aren't what they should be, right? And so if I was giving advice to someone in that position, I would say to use that anger, to use those feelings as fuel to get involved and make it better. I said before, my kids are going to look at me and say, what did you do to make things better? And it's not going to be good enough for me to say, well, you can blame the boomers for ruining everything. And it's not my fault that we didn't, use the power of the Attorney General's office to try and address climate justice in a way that's never done before. We all have a responsibility. And, Liz, you and I both have worked in the criminal justice system, for example. And that's where I first learned as a young prosecutor. The scales of justice don't balance themselves, right? Our systems are only as good as the people that are involved in trying to make them better. And, that's how I've always seen my responsibility as someone with these incredibly powerful positions. When you work in government as a prosecutor, as a county solicitor, you have incredible power and you have an obligation to use it to help other people. I'd say get involved, use that fuel to make it better, because there's no excuses. The next generation is going to hold the last one accountable for what we did or didn't do.
I don't think anyone comes through the criminal system unscathed, whether it's prosecutors, public defenders, law enforcement, judges. You see it wear on everyone in there. I'm truly in awe of your ability and willingness to keep fighting, because so many people I started out with don't have that in them at this point. Do you consider yourself an optimist?
Yeah, absolutely. I feel like I don't have a choice. I mean, I'm lucky enough to have been born in this country, right? I mean, I didn't think about it until a few years ago that, when my dad wanted to come here, if there had been a president calling for a ban on all Muslim immigrants coming to this country, there would be no cons in the United States, and I'm able-bodied and I got to go to great public schools. So how can I not be an optimist? I've had incredible privileges, and I'm incredibly lucky to get to use those advantages to help others.
I love that. We call ourselves reckless optimists, delusional optimists, any type of optimism, we'll take it.
That's right.
Awesome.
Another question for you about corruption in politics. What's the secret to holding corrupt politicians accountable?
Well, getting back to what we said before, I mean, I think number one, it's really important if they're elected officials to have people that will step up and challenge them. So, I talked a little bit about my entry into politics, which was standing up against someone I thought was a corrupt politician. And I thought someone ought to do something about it, whether or not the police or FBI ever got involved. I was really discouraged when we first started hearing stories about Bob Menendez in New Jersey, and nobody stepped up to challenge him, right? And the FBI took a swing and they missed, and they eventually came back, and who knows what's going to happen with that, right? And now we have people stepping up. But I think that's the most important thing, and I don't think it's a secret. I just think it's really hard to run for office. It can be very difficult to, as the old saying goes, right? You come at the king, you best not miss, right? And so that can be very daunting to go after very powerful people. And I think you benefit if you have that optimism. And I think beyond that, frankly, if there's a secret to it, it's just tenacity. Certainly if you're asking about corrupt politicians, right, I was always a big believer in really kind of starting small. And Liz, you'd appreciate this. I mean, I was really, really proud of the fact that during my 16 years as a prosecutor, I had an outstanding reputation with public defenders and defense attorneys and judges that I was never going to sort of blur the lines or push the envelope. And if the evidence wasn't there, we weren't going to try and violate anyone's rights, right? And I think that by the same token, corrupt politicians, are like anyone else. They deserve due process. And so by really just focusing, when you'd hear a lot of rumors about corrupt activity, focusing on, do we actually have a crime here, right? And focusing on the most provable aspect of something being criminal and then building up from there. That was a really effective way for us to think about what seemed like really intractable, large issues. So, for example, as a federal prosecutor, one of the things we would often look at is, are these folks involved in cheating on their taxes? Because that often went hand in hand with other kind of a corrupt activity. And by sort of having that kind of focus and getting an idea of this is how people who are breaking the law are going about their business, that not only helped us think about building larger cases and, getting an understanding of how people were structuring their illegal activities, it also helped us have conversations with these folks. Because a lot of times the way that we went after corrupt politicians was by going up to people that were in their circles, that were helping them, that were also breaking the law, and saying, listen, you have broken the public's trust, but you have a chance to make it right. Help us build a case against somebody else. And sometimes by showing them the small things that they did. Yeah, we know that you stole this money from this account. We know that you cheated on your taxes. it made it easier for people to accept that actually they were now someone who was going to be charged with a crime, who was going to have to be held accountable for a crime. So that's a little bit of my trade secret about how we did it when I was with the feds.
Well, I was already going to offer you a Sour Patch Kid for quoting The Wire. Am I wrong? That was a Wire quote, right? Very impressive.
That's Omar.
But
Thank you.
But then, saying that you would actually withdraw a case if you don't have the evidence, that's actually quite rare in the land of prosecution. So that's a 2 Sour Patch Kid moment.
Well, it should,
at least in my experience, I should say.
It shouldn't be. And that is
be.
the standard. That will be the standard in the Attorney General's office if it isn't now, because that's what justice requires.
Amazing. And I'm going to hold you to that. We got a recording of it. So if I need to
Deal.
Beat your door down to say, listen, sir. What's the most exciting change you foresee coming in the next year or two, other than obviously being elected Attorney General of Pennsylvania?
Well, that is the most exciting. So I'd say if I'm thinking outside of politics, I am most excited about season 3 of The Bear.
I love The Bear.
You've got me thinking about television.
Yes,
now. Yeah,
and we didn't pre-script this, I promise. All right, I'm going for the popcorn for that one. Sean, you want some popcorn?
Sure.
Yeah, no, my kids and I love The Bear. There's just so much in there to love. And I actually think about it a lot like during the campaign, because it's a lot about like high standards and like, family and being part of a team, and food's like a big part of my life and my family's life and stuff. So, but we got to wait for like a year or two for the next season.
Excruciating.
So what are we going to do?
Oh, it was so good. I walked around talking about it all the time. Really, really strongly recommend watching The Bear. Do you watch The Bear?
I don't, but I've heard from many people that it's superb and that there's some good recipes to be gleaned from The Bear.
I'm sure, but there's like family, there's love recipes, there's family recipes. It's a little something for everybody.
Yeah, my kids and I made Carmi's homemade Sprite.
Oh,
see?
It's so cute.
And just like in a campaign, every second counts. It's true.
I love that. Well, are there any changes you wish were coming down the pike, but you think are still probably a decade out?
Yeah, my mom's really sick. She has a form of leukemia that doesn't really have a cure. And so I don't think that's a year or two away. I think that's more like 10 years away. And I really wish it was coming sooner. Yeah.
Inhale, exhale moment. Fighting for a better world for everybody. And of course, my enviro brain starts turning to all of the ways that that's connected to the work that we do. Anyone else you have eyes on politically?
Well, Andy Kim is running against Bob Menendez, and I'm super enthused by his run. And
so is Sean.
Are you?
I'm a fan of Representative Kim. Yeah, I've been. He declared, I think, the day after the indictment was announced, and he consulted with only his wife beforehand. So he really felt it in his heart. He's, I think, a real one.
Yeah, look, he and I are both in a position where we have to win a primary, right, in order to get there. So he's got a tough fight, and I don't know how it's going to go. But I've always been an admirer of him. We both share kind of a backstory that involves Barack Obama, and one of the things I learned from Obama was the way he never let people feel like he was the smartest person in the room, even though he was, and just had this humility about him. And Andy, I think, really projects that, just this decency and integrity that I think is hard to miss. It's also exciting, he would be the first Asian American elected statewide. I'm in a similar position here in Pennsylvania, but really, I think like me, he really leads with being a parent. In Congress, he started the Dad Caucus, which really just gets me. And so I'm really cheering him on. He's got his race, I've got mine, but that's one I'm watching.
Yeah, we've got our eyes on Andy Kim's race as well. And for folks who perhaps aren't familiar with Congressman Kim, he had a viral moment following the January 6th riot at the Capitol where he was helping clean up the rotunda by hand and took up a broom and was sweeping the rotunda. So that's the kind of guy he is.
I think he was wearing a blue suit, and I think that suit is now in the Smithsonian.
I didn't know that. Wow. That's cool. Cool in a weird way. You can tell you're a lawyer when you think stuff like that is cool.
3 lawyers on this podcast, so we're all into that. So while we're on the subject of people we admire, are there any particularly influential people or great organizations you want to give a shout out to?
Other than Clean Air Action, of course.
Yeah. Big ups to Second Generation. That is also an organization I'm really honored to be endorsed by. And I was actually involved in founding it a few years ago. It's an organization that looks at immigrant communities across Pennsylvania that have really been underrepresented in the communities where they are, and supports candidates from those communities who step up to run. They've been doing this work now for, I think, 6 years, supporting often insurgent candidates who are kind of running against the odds and sometimes winning. So really excited to see them continuing the good work, and really honored to now have their support.
Now, I have a bit of a fun question here.
These are all fun questions.
It's right. These are all fun questions. But switching gears a little bit, as a baseball fan myself, I've often thought, what would my walk-ups song be as I stepped up to the plate?
Oh, wow. That's a good one.
Do you have a song that pumps you up? What would your walk-up song be?
Oh, boy. It would
Just the one you're comfortable sharing with the public.
Yeah. Not for my hip hop playlists. It would probably be something from the Foo Fighters. They're kind of my touchstone. Dave Grohl's kind of my go-to person musically and with other stuff. So, what would be the right Foo Fighters? Probably Learn to Fly. Yeah.
I am also a huge Dave Grohl admirer. He's a tremendous rock and roll human. And that's an excellent choice.
Yeah. And have you ever seen did you see what they did in that town in Italy?
I don't know that I did.
Oh, you have to see this.
No.
So just Google Learn to Fly, Italy. It's awesome. There's this village in Italy. I think it's like Ticina, something like that.
Okay.
And it's too small to be on like the Foo Fighters World Tour list, right? So they wanted to get the attention of the Foo Fighters, and they did a really big gesture, which is they created the world's largest rock band.
Wow.
And they got 1,000 musicians all playing guitar, drums, bass, and they play Learn to Fly.
That's cool.
Amazing.
And it's just this unbelievably amazing performance. And there's just so much joy. And this is why I love Dave Grohl, because like he just spreads joy, right?
He really does.
It's just like he's all about awesomeness and, making everyone feel awesome and seeing the possibilities of being awesome together. And that's what this video is. And so everyone plays their hearts out. And by the way, they're all Italian. And there are also like musicians that came from other parts of Europe, and they're singing Learn to Fly in English. And of course, then, the Foo Fighters were moved, and then they flew to Italy and they performed. You can see that too. So it's pretty awesome.
That fills my heart with joy for so many reasons.
Yeah.
One being, look at people power.
Yeah.
Right? If you told those people they're never going to come here and they listened, then they never would.
Yeah.
But instead they got creative. I love that. I also love Dave Grohl. Something I admire about him is I have never heard anything controversial about him. So though I'm sure it exists, it's oddly refreshing to me that some people manage to just like keep this cool public image that I don't have to worry about Dave Grohl getting canceled. And when you said Foo Fighters, you got a nod of approval from everyone in the room, including our rock star over there who puts the podcast together.
Awesome.
But you mentioned hip hop. I'm a bit of a hip hop head, so I got to know what your hip hop pump up song would be.
Oh boy, are we supposed to talk about this? There's a lot of bad lyrics. Right now I'm listening to Killer Mike's album.
Nice.
Which I was like a couple months late to this.
Solid answer.
Yeah, but so I'm listening to that a lot right now.
Love that.
Very cool.
Yeah.
You've had a lengthy career. Are there any highlights? This is my way of calling you old. No.
I've been a lawyer half my life. Can you believe that?
I cannot believe that.
24 years as a lawyer.
Wow, that is wild. So you have amassed more milestones, achievements, accomplishments than probably Sean and I combined so far. Do you want to give us some of the highlights, some of your faves?
Sure. My work in the DA's office was primarily addressing sexual assault, child abuse, and domestic violence. So it's certainly, it's very difficult material to talk about and share and work that was very often hard to kind of leave at the office. But one of the cases that I am most proud of that is very well known because the offender was so notorious. He was known as the Match.com rapist, and it took 4 years to really bring him to justice, and he victimized countless women. And I often point to his example of how badly broken our bail system is, because when I prosecuted sexual assault cases, I sometimes had, Liz, your clients, right, our victims and survivors testifying, being brought in the courtroom in shackles because they couldn't afford the bail on relatively low-level offenses. And meanwhile, people like Jeffrey Marsalis were buying their way out of jail, right? Because bail was just a dollar amount that he was able to afford, so he could go out on bail while he's waiting, trial for rape and sexually assault more women. So that was a good example of, again, like the scales of justice not balancing themselves, really having to be tenacious to get justice. We've talked about some of my corruption work in the U.S. Attorney's Office, going after corrupt politicians. That was very difficult. I'm very proud of not just the fact that, some people went to jail for conduct that they should have been punished for, but more importantly, that those communities got a fresh start. If you look in the Lehigh Valley, there are all these new leaders that have stepped forward since that fresh start happened. And then most recently, when I served as the Bucks County solicitor here, probably the one thing I'm most proud of is that we became the first county in America to go after TikTok and Snapchat and, Facebook and YouTube for targeting our kids with their algorithms. And, it's just like I said to the young skeptic or the young cynic who is angry, who wants to, express their feelings about the system, right? I was really angry when I found out that when I put my kids reluctantly on screens during the pandemic, that YouTube saw that as an opportunity to prey on them and try and keep them hooked. So when we took action to go after those companies, we were sort of called the David versus Goliath fight, because at that point, the attorneys generals of America were not involved. For me, that was very much about just standing up as a parent. And so I'm really proud that I got to do that, not as a lawyer, but as a parent on behalf of parents everywhere. And of all the cases I just mentioned, that was the one where I got the most texts on my phone from other parents and people saying, yeah, we knew something was going on and we knew somebody should do something about it. And thank you for doing something about it. And I think that's what a role like Attorney General is about. People don't necessarily know that the Attorney General actually has tools that can address the housing crisis. They just expect that there's these problems out there and there should be somebody in government stepping up to help them. And that, I think, is how we need to see these positions as opportunity to help address people's problems.
And it's shocking to me as a lawyer how poorly people understand the office of Attorney General. I mentioned to you someone I was speaking with recently who was curious why I was so invested in the Attorney General race. He said, but you work in environmental politics. What does that have to do with the Attorney General's office? And I said, oh, it has everything to do with the Attorney General's office. So again, why it was a very easy decision for us to endorse you, because we couldn't be more sure that you're the right candidate for that office. So closing thoughts, any other projects or work you're excited about that you want to boost?
Besides running statewide for the most important office that no one's talking about.
Yeah, what do you do in your free time?
So do a lot of fitness to try and, continue to fit in my suits as I, go across the turnpike eating Burger King.
Or eating snacks during podcasts.
Yeah, exactly.
Have another Sour Patch Kid.
Besides my own race, I am actually very excited about some of the other races that are on the ballot this year. Our friend Eleanor Breslin is an example of these awesome House candidates that have stepped up that I think have these amazing platforms. I think it's, really exciting that there's just a lot of people that are stepping up to fight for these really difficult fights this year. So it's races like that I'm really focused on right now, besides my own. Yeah.
Spoiler alert.
We're going to try and have Eleanor on maybe our next episode.
Awesome.
We agree. She is fantastic.
Mm-hmm. She is.
And we'll be endorsing her. She doesn't know yet, so don't tell her.
Spoiler alert.
All right. Everyone hear that?
Well, any last thoughts before we close it out here?
No. Well, do you think Carmi's going to...
Okay, first of all, that is a spoiler. So we're going to have to edit that part out. But
Okay.
Let's see. Did you have a favorite Bear episode, one that springs to mind?
Yeah.
Or a scene?
What was what was it? Oh.
Hardest question you got so far.
Yeah, you're going to have to edit this out, well, I think. But there was, it was the one that starts with the song Chicago, right, from Sufjan Stevens, which is when all the orders come in, right? Mm-hmm. And the episode goes so fast, and when it's over, you can't believe it's over, right? And that was season 1, I think, right? That was season 1.
Yeah.
I didn't know that song. I lived in Chicago. I went to law school there. That's where I met Obama. And I didn't know that song, and I love that song now. There's like multiple versions of it if you haven't heard it. And do you know the song? It's got this great chorus.
We're gonna have to
It's a deep cut, but it's a good one.
Yeah. There's so much going on in that song, by the way, which they play, which is part of how they trick the audience, because it's like a long song, and so you're kind of following along. But kind of like that Foo Fighters Learn to Fly, where you hear like 1,000 people singing, like, you know, there's all these people that come into the chorus and people kind of coming together in that song itself. And so the song and the episode are about Chicago, but it's also very specific about what's happening in that kitchen. And spoiler alert, everything goes wrong, but it is just a really gripping story. So that's my favorite episode.
I love that. That's beautiful. Solid answer. But now I have to ask, so it didn't occur to me that you went to Chicago Law. So did you have Obama as a professor?
I did. Yeah. Oh.
Can we get an Obama story?
Sure. My Obama story is like my origin story, because, as you know, in law school, especially if you go right out of college, and I graduated law school when I was 24, right? So I was like at a point in my life where I'm looking for direction, and I had this great public school education. I had the advantages of being an American, and, you know, and trying to figure out where I was going to go. And I also was just trying to reconcile from an identity standpoint the fact that I always felt different, you know, in every room I went into. I mean, half Pakistani, half not, right? My dad was Muslim. My mom was Catholic, grew up in a Jewish neighborhood, right? And he had the same background. His dad was a Muslim immigrant. His mom was a Christian American. And he helped me understand that having to navigate every conversation of your entire life, building a bridge to a different culture, was not going to be a handicap. It was going to be a superpower. And that's my origin story for being a public interest lawyer.
I love that. I was recently telling my colleagues that being from the middle of nowhere, upstate New York, which I refer to as white bread New York, and I'm Arab. A lot of people don't realize that about me. I don't talk about it a lot. But where I'm from, people talked about my green skin and my hair. Oh my God, your hair, it's so dark and curly. And around here, nobody notices it. But in upstate New York, I was noticeably different. And just as you described, I had similar experiences to learning how to bridge and talk to people. So it's really been such a pleasure to have you on the podcast.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks for sharing that.
Yeah, this has been fantastic.
Thank you for tuning in to Cleaning Up Dirty. If you can't get enough of Clean Air Action, check out our website at cleanairactionfund.org and our socials at Clean Air Action.